Welcome to this tutorial, everybody, where we'll be chatting about Adobe's Extendscript and JavaScript and how to program in these languages. The programming language that we'll be using to interact with the Adobe suite is called Extendscript. And it's an extension on the existing JavaScript, as you know and love, or love to hate. JavaScript has been around for years and is based on the ECMAScript standards. These ECMAScripts define the ways that JavaScript needs to operate and interact, and basically tells compilers, your browser, Chrome, Safari, exactly what is JavaScript and what isn't. ECMAScript is an open standard that anybody can use to write a programming language with. Over the years, we've seen things like JScript and ActionScript, and these have become the most popular variants of JavaScript, and I'm pretty sure you've never heard of them. Extendscript is another one of these languages that have extended the ECMAScript standards, ECMAScript 3 to be specific, which was released in 1999. Think about it this way: Adobe needed a language to interact with their hosts, and rather than writing their own language from scratch, they just looked on the market, saw that JavaScript using the ECMAScript standard was picking up some pace, and decided to go with that. The advantage of that is you already have a wide range of developers that can code in JavaScript that can now as well code in your Extendscript. So what does this relationship between Extendscript and JavaScript mean for you and me when we want to start automating our processes within the Adobe suite? Well, the advantage is if you can code JavaScript, you can already code Extendscript. If you can't code JavaScript yet, don't worry, stick around. In this tutorial, we're going to look at some if statements, we're going to look at some ands and some ors, some for loops, as well as how JavaScript stores objects. If you're looking for any additional resources, we'll drop a few links in the comments for some open source free JavaScript tutorials online. We're going to eventually wrap it up in this video, bring it back to our Premiere Pro API and writing some for loops and if statements within the Premiere Pro. So how do we go about coding some JavaScript on your PC? Do you need to install anything? Answer is no, you already have a JavaScript interpreter at your disposal within your browser. So because browsers have to run JavaScript the whole time, there's actually quite an easy way to get a JavaScript interpreter going within Google Chrome. All you gotta do, right click, head over to inspect. So I don't have inspect here, I've got inspectieren. Apologies, my Mac's on Dutch here. And basically what we're gonna do, gonna hit inspect, and this little window is gonna pop up. And the first thing we're going to do, the elements. So if you know any web development, you've been in this little console, you've been playing with these elements, because this basically allows you to debug your code, look at your website, look at the different elements on your website, take you to the code where that is. But we're not too concerned about this elements tab. We want to head over to this console tab. And this is going to give us access to JavaScript. We can write pure JavaScript within this console. And depending on which web page you opened your inspector, you might have some more or less warnings over here, but I'm just going to go and clear all of these warnings by just going clear console. Great stuff. Okay, so now we're set up to start coding some JavaScript. Did you know you've always had a JavaScript interpreter right there at your disposal? I know Safari is a bit more difficult to get at. You've got to activate some developer options, so I advise just working in Chrome with me over here. So let's start with the programming basics. Variables. What are variables? Variables are like placeholders. You can think of it as a little container that's got a name and you can place things in there. For example, I'm going to go here in our console and declare a variable called my dog's name. And I'm going to set that equal to Jake. So what this is doing in the background is JavaScript is reserving some space in RAM for you via Chrome and saying, hey, you want to store a string, you want to store some text called Jake, and I'm going to store that for you somewhere. So Chrome deals with all of that. It finds a little place in memory for you to go and drop your Jake variable and gives your JavaScript interpreter a handle on that variable. What that means for us now is that we can actually go and say a command like console.log my dog's name, and we will print out this value of Jake. Okay, let's unpack a bit what's going on here. So console.log, very common function that we're going to use, and it basically prints out what you pass to it to the console. We are currently in the console, right? So all we are logging things, and what are we logging? My dog's name. Just to drive the idea home here, if I were to log something like hello world, just pass in some string directly in there, I will get a printout of hello world. So this undefined that we're getting over here is what console.log is returning. And seeing that console.log has got a side effect of printing out a value to the terminal, to the console. By the way, console also called a terminal, also called a command line interface, right? So we're all very used to using the GUI, using our graphical user interface. But here we're getting down and dirty, we're heading into the command line interface. And this is a whole other world that opens up to you and a new interface into your applications. Right, so why do we want to use variables? Well, looking at our dog's name Jake example here, we might want a way to quickly greet dogs as they come into our store. We might have a default greeting that we might want to slowly change over time. For example, I'm going to define a greeting here called hello there, comma. And what this now allows is we've got our two variables here, my dog's name and greeting. And if I were to go and print out console.log our greeting plus our my dog's name, we'll see that it actually puts together my dog's name as well as the greeting. So it concatenates those two strings. Now the advantage of that is if I were to go and change my dog's name to Bob and I rerun this console.log, I'm gonna get there, hello there, Bob. So you can think of variables, again, they're placeholders, and it's a way for people to interact with your application. In our case, our way to act with Adobe, and we're gonna be passing variables back and forth the whole time, changing values, changing variables. The second most important thing to know about your variables when programming is their type. Why this is so important is if you are of a certain type within JavaScript, a lot of additional features, attributes, and methods get added to you, which the user, you and I, can actually then utilize. So to check a type of a variable, I'm gonna just go ahead here and type of. And if we check out my dog's name, we'll see that it is actually a string. So a string in JavaScript, a string in programming, usually refers to a character, a string of characters, right? Similarly, our type of our greeting will also be of type string, right? So let's declare another type of variable here. I'm gonna go and declare a variable called my number, call it 4. And if we ask what is the type of my number, lo and behold, we're gonna get number. Right, so why is this important? Well, for example, if I were to go and declare a second number here and make it of type string, make it a 5, but within those double quotes, and I say my number plus my second number, what we expect is 9. However, what we get is 45. And that is all because of our types. Because in the background, JavaScript is saying, okay, cool, you want to put together two things. You want to put together this 4 number and this 5 string. It needs to make a choice. Am I converting the string to a number, or am I converting the number to a string? So what JavaScript is doing here for us is some implicit conversion. When it hits a summation operator of 2 different types, it's going to have some rules, and these are those rules defined in ECMAScript that says how should I actually treat these variables? What should I do if I'm adding together a string and an integer, string and a number, etc., etc. So these are little small things that you need to be aware of in JavaScript. They come with time and they're going to bite you many, many a time. But with time, you learn where all the sort of potholes lie. If anybody else in the world knows what a pothole is. Next, we're looking at some core programming operators. And you can think of operators within programming as your tools. So we're going to show you many things. You can go online, learn of many cool tools that you can use. We're going to touch on some if statements, some for loops. These are really your basic, your bread and butter tools when programming. However, there are more advanced tools for some more advanced features. But we'll be looking at the basics, an if statement and a for loop. All right, so if statement at its core is a decision in the road. Should I buy pizza tonight or not? And based on some condition, we will tell the user yes or no, or we'll make some decision in our program. Bring it back to some Adobe, if my time spent on this project is exceeded, then make a coffee, something like that. So with programming, much like any other language that you learn, you've got to learn how to use the letters, how to use the words, in which context, where, what punctuation do you need to use, etc, etc. So JavaScript, no different, just another programming language. So we're looking at if statements, and I'm here in the console and showing you the basic outline of how a if condition within programming is, within JavaScript looks. Right, so if open circle bracket, I'm gonna put in here condition as a variable. So this is currently just a placeholder. We've not defined it, and you'll see shortly how JavaScript actually complains about that. So we're saying here if condition, open curly brace, close curly brace. What this means is if this condition is met, then we'll go into these curly braces and execute whatever code is contained in there. So I'm gonna just go in here and write console log condition met. Right. Just a little side mission. I'm using double quotes here. Single quotes will do just fine. JavaScript isn't too picky. So I'm adding a little semicolon here at the end of my line here. This is good JavaScript practice, but as JavaScript has evolved over the years, semicolons at the end of a line have got mixed opinions. So use them, don't use them, but in general, it's a good coding practice to add them. So I'm putting my little semicolon here at the end of my command. Executing this, it'll tell me, hey, condition is not defined. So I'm trying to tell this console, hey, if this condition is met, please print out this thing. But this condition has never been defined, and we haven't defined our condition. So imagine we were to say, gonna go and create our variable, condition, and we just say true. Our condition is true. We store the value of true in our condition. If we now again execute this if condition piece of code, we'll see that what actually does get printed out to the console is condition met. All right. Let's expand our if condition to a bit more of a complex condition. And let's set the scene. You've got a few clips on your timeline and you would like to detect all the clips that are longer than 30 seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a hold of all those clips. We'll loop through them, but somewhere in our code, we're going to have a few lines saying if that clip's duration is greater than some threshold, for us it's now 30 seconds, then please color that clip, flag that clip. Else, do nothing. Right, so we've got a clip duration of 25 and we want to flag clips that are longer than 30 seconds. So our current clip that we're looking at, again, bigger picture, we're looping through some clips. Each clip's got a duration, and somewhere in our code, we're gonna have an if statement saying, if this clip that we're busy looking at, this duration is longer than 30 seconds, please clip it. So in code, that's gonna look something like this. If the clip duration is greater than 30, then please flag. I'm gonna simulate that flag, flagging the clip as just a console.log. And then we're gonna close that curly brace, right? So these curly braces in JavaScript govern what is called scope. And that's basically a big chunk of code. So we use the curly braces to say that this code fits together. On the other hand, if our clip isn't longer than 30, then we don't want to flag it. So we'll use this little else keyword in JavaScript to open our else scope, our else little code block. and we'll give it a don't flag. If I execute this, I'm getting a don't flag because obviously our clip duration is less than 30. However, and by the way, I'm just using the up and down arrow keys here. If you are in your console, using the up and down arrow keys will actually take you through the entire history of all the commands that you run. I'm going up here and I'm saying, hey, let's make this clip duration 35. Going up and running this if block of code again. And as you can see, we'll be flagging this clip as it is longer than 35 seconds. Great. So that's if statements in a nutshell. They get a lot more complicated. So you can think of definitely multiple conditions. So say if the clip is greater than 30 and the clip looks like this and this or this. So these if conditions that we put together can sometimes get quite complicated. However, if you wanted to select the clips that are greater than 30, but as well shorter than 50, then our current approach has got a bit of a shortcoming, right? We've got two conditions now, not just the one. So how we string conditions together in JavaScript is by using this ampersand, the double ampersand, and the double pipe, right? So these characters, special to JavaScript, not that special. A lot of programming languages actually use the ampersand and the pipe to denote an and or an or, a logical and a logical or. And we'll look into what that means. But it is as your intuition suggests. And means both conditions need to be true. So is the clip greater than 30 and is the clip less than 50? Or implies either can be true. So is the clip greater than 30 or less than 50? If any of these two is met, then the ultimate condition, the resolved condition, will also be true. So to explain that a bit in code here, I've got our clip duration variable here, and I'm gonna go and set it equal to, let's say 40, right? Setting it equal to 40, clearing a terminal here, great stuff. Now if I were to ask, hey, is this clip duration greater than 30? As you can see, yes it is, great stuff. But now I want to bring in the extra condition saying, is this clip as well less than 50? And to do that, we need to introduce some round braces around our condition. And that is just for JavaScript to know what pieces of code it should keep together. So conditions, we're going to wrap in these curly braces, and now we can say we'd like that to be met as well as the duration to be less than 50. And as you can see, that is evaluating to true still. However, if I were to change this value of clip duration from 40 to 55, we'll see that this and condition of ours does not hold true anymore. And that is because our clip duration less than 50, this little piece of our puzzle is evaluating to false, which is then evaluating this entire statement to false. So to string that together in a little if statement, I do something like this, if, but now that's our full condition, and this is where programming gets a bit nasty, the bracket management. But there we go. Curly braces around there. Luckily, as you can see, Chrome is nice enough to highlight the associated brace in our console here. So this little first brace is associated with that one. This is our one condition, that's our second condition. Again, nothing stops you adding more and more and more conditions. And if both of those are met, console.log for us. Great. Right, the next concept we're going to look at is for loops. And for loops make your life easy. Let's look at an example. Say we wanted to have our dog bark. I'm going to go and simulate our dog barking with just a console.log bark here in my console. All well and nice, but say we want to have our dog bark 5 times. We could go up and run this command 5 times, effectively simulating our dog barking 5 times. And we'd feel quite pleased with ourselves. However, if we wanted to let our dog bark 100 times, then this method of manually doing it one by one isn't that viable. And that is where for loops come in. Now, for loops is basically a way to iterate, to loop through. values contained in either a list, or usually what you'd see is just have some number. So you just have a dummy variable, usually denoted with I, go into example now, that just runs from 0 to 100. And we don't necessarily do something with that I, it's just to keep track for us where we are in our loop. And then within our loop, we'll start executing some code. Right. So in JavaScript, a for loop follows the following syntax. We're gonna have a for, open round brace, and then we're gonna have to define this dummy variable that I've been speaking about. And usually that goes by the name of I. So we've got I equal to 0, and now we want to keep looping. We want this loop to continue till where? And we mentioned we want our dog to bark 100 times, right? So I want to say where I is less than 100. And what do we want to do every time we loop through? Well, we'd like I to take the value of I plus 1. Okay, so this is quite a foreign concept if you've never coded before, but the idea here is we want some variable to run from 0 to 100 so that we can go through this loop 100 times and do what we would have done, once manually. We can now automate 100 times or even more. Okay, so we're starting at 0, we're running up to 100, and we're increasing I by 1 every time. If I open my little curly brace there again, so for loops, they follow the syntax, the for, 3 parameters that you got to specify there. And then we open this new for block scope using our curly braces. If I go in there now and I say, hey, let's have our dog bark, and I close my curly brace, then you'll see that we're actually printing out bark 100 times. The console log is smart enough to group similar messages, so we only get this little 100 over here. But we can make our messages unique every time so that it doesn't group it by just adding our little I. And bam! There our dog is barking 100 times. Amazing. But you can think of this as easy to extend application of this is for us to jump into VS Code, which we're going to do, and mute all of our tracks, right? So here I've got a few video tracks open, I've got a few audio tracks, and we want to loop through all of these tracks and set the mute value to true. So if you don't know how to use the set mute functionality of the Adobe Premiere Pro, check out our first video. Otherwise, head over to this Premiere Pro enhances.com documentation. And here we've got our track object that has got its set mute method, and we basically need to tell it to set each track to 0. But in order for us to do that, we first need to get a hold on these tracks and we need to loop through them. Cool, so we're in here in VS Code and I've created my mute all tracks file. And basically what we're going to do now is we want to go and create our launch.json file. We're going to use the Extendscript template there. And because we opened our folder in VS Code, we have this workspace folder variable at our disposal, and we can just go and say we want to execute our mute all tracks.jsx file. Let's call this mute all tracks. Great stuff. Head over to our debugger now. We'll see that our mute all tracks, the configuration that we just added, has been added. So we go ahead and execute this. We're going to get an error that says I can't start the session with the active target because we haven't selected our target yet. So here at the bottom, we got our yellow select target. Me, I've got Premiere Pro 2019 open. So just selecting that target in there, see that yellow changes to white. And now we will actually have a hook into our host, right? So our code isn't doing anything at this moment. What we want to do though, is just maybe write it out here, get all our video tracks, loop through our video tracks, and set each track's mute to true. Great stuff. To get all of our tracks, we're gonna go and descend through the API hierarchy, and that API hierarchy that we need to follow is basically we're gonna start here on the application object, then we're gonna head into the project, we're gonna head into the sequence, and in the sequence you'll actually see that we've got our video tracks and our audio tracks attributes there. So in code, that's going to look something like this. app.project.activeSequence.video tracks. Now I'm just go ahead and declare a variable to store all of our video tracks. Great stuff. Right, so we just want to see if what our code that we've written, our video tracks, if we're actually getting anything back from Premiere Pro. And to do that, we usually debug our code. We print some things out to the console, as we did in JavaScript. However, because we're now in Adobe's world, and we're not writing full-on JavaScript, the way for us to print things out to the terminal within VS Code is to use this $.write, open round bracket, close round bracket. And what we're going to do there is we're just going to print out our video tracks variable that we declared. And I know that there is an attribute called number of tracks. So if we execute this code, we'll see here in the console that we're getting 5. And that actually does agree with what we have going on here in Premiere Pro. We've got 5 video tracks. So let's just see if we add another video track here, jump back into VS Code, execute this. We actually do say that we've got our 6 video tracks. Right, great. So we've got our top number of tracks, right? So now we just want to kick off this little for loop and loop through all of these tracks. So again, we're going to use this a little dummy variable. You can call it anything. We're going to start at 0. We're going to increase until we get 2. And this is now going to be our number of tracks. So we're not going indefinitely to 100. We are actually going to number of tracks. And this is a little shorthand. So I equals I plus 1 can be shorthanded as just I plus plus. Opening and squaring my brackets. Again, I like to just make sure that the code that I've just written is working. So I'm just going to quickly print out my I. And we see that we are actually printing out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the console. Again, not going up to 6 because we only have a less than there. Great, so this I is going to give us a handle on our video tracks. So now we can actually just go and say, hey, video tracks, this ith element, right? We want to do something with you. And what do we want to do? We want to set you to mute. Great, let's keep our little right here. And let's actually add some text here to just make some more sense here. So we're saying done muting track 1. Great stuff. Boom, boom, boom. Awesome. So things have happened. Our text printed out doesn't look great. But lo and behold, in Adobe, all of our tracks have indeed been muted. Cool. Just to touch a bit on this printout that is going on here. That's not looking great. So nothing is telling Adobe to go to a new line on this current code that we've got. So to do that, I'm just going to add this little \n there. And in programming world, that denotes an enter, right? Like literally the enter note is denoted with this \n. So if I do that, rerun our for loop, we see a nice little below each other, our tracks being muted. Look along here in Adobe, we see the same thing happening, and we can reverse the process. So instead of setting it to true, right, we maybe want to go and set our mute status to false. If I head over here, run this, we can see each one of them going to 0. Right, so today we've looked at some basics of Extendscript and JavaScript. We've looked at some if conditions, we've looked at some for loops, how you can string together some if conditions using ands and ors, and as well as how you can loop through all of your video tracks, muting each one of them in Premiere Pro.